Good morning, afternoon or evening wherever you are. I'm Paul Clark and welcome to my studio. So, what have I got for you lovely lot today? Well, today's something a little bit different because I've had quite a few of you ask me about the problems with getting the water to paint ratio right and how to get the correct balance. With a lot of people saying that they get their washes far too watery, and this is definitely something that I find in my local watercolour classes, and it's a problem that many new learners struggle with. So, here's the important thing. If you can take away the pressure and the mindset of having to paint something in particular, then you can concentrate more on what the paint can do. And these are definitely some exercises great for beginners, but for those of you who are more experienced. So come and join me and we'll have some fun experimenting and mixing with our paint ratios. So I'm going to be doing these exercises in my watercolour sketchbook. It's watercolour paper, but it's a fairly smooth finish, and I use it mainly for scribbling and sketches and working out ideas. And I'm using just one brush from my range, my what I call workhorse brush, a number 12 round. Regarding my colours, I've had several of you ask what is my full palette. Now, to be fair, it does change over the years, with new colours being added from time to time, and I'm not including special colours like granulating paints, but these 17 are pretty much all I use. Okay, now for exercise 1, and I'm starting by literally chucking in loads of water in random places. Now you can use any colours you want, but I'll list the ones I'm using below. And I'm starting by putting in a fairly diluted watery wash of French ultramarine. Then dropping in a much thicker consistency of some dark Celine purple. And again, altering my consistencies all the time, using a lot more pigment in some washes and a lot less in others. And most of these washes I'll be painting today is the traditional wetting wet technique. Even just adding in plain clean water to see what happens. And as I said in my introduction, you can still use lots of water as well as lots of thick pigment. Just experiment. I'm purposely knocking a lot of these washes into each other just to see what happens to the flow of the paint. This burnt sienna that I'm putting in here is basically pure pigment, straight from the tube. It's good to see how it reacts with the wetter washes. Bit of bonkers splatting just for the fun of it, and all of this is being filmed in real time, nothing has been speeded up. Now, although I said use whichever colours you like, try and keep it to a fairly limited palette. I think I'm only using 4 or 5 colours here maximum. Now I'm also doing a lot of lifting out with a damp brush, just to practice preserving some of those lighter areas. Just don't be afraid of using lots of water. And of course, lots of pigment too. And most of the colours you see here are actually being mixed on the paper rather than on my palette. Let's see what happens if we splat in some really thick consistency Payne's Grey. Could be interesting. The important thing is, and I know I say this a lot in my tutorials, don't fiddle. Let the paint paint itself, let the paint work for you. Too many brush strokes is when your paints begin to get muddy. Now I always like to include a bit of mark making using the end of my brush, and I'm really scratching hard into the surface of the paper. Now what you get, where the paint is very wet, the colour seeps into the groove that you've made and gives you a darker version of that colour. But where the paint has begun to dry, I'm getting a lighter mark where the paint is being dragged off. Now here, try tapping just lightly some drops of clean water into these drying washes and you'll get a lovely soft motley effect. Now there are some great ways I've heard these consistencies being described, such as tea, milk, cream and even thick like yogurt. But nothing beats getting out there and practicing with experiments like this. Experience counts for so much in watercolour and you'll learn every time you paint. These paint ratios will just become instinctive. More splats, and this time into washes which are semi-dry. And who cares where that goes? Yep, beginning to get some interesting blooms and cauliflowers appearing. Little tip before removing the masking tape is just give it a quick blast with a hairdryer. It'll just help to soften the glue, thus the tape will peel off that little bit easier. There we go, all done in about 10 minutes. Now it could be a landscape, but that's not the important thing. It's all about learning to use the paint. Okay, next for exercise 2, and this time I'm going to be starting with a vertical format and again chucking in loads of clean water. A nice watery, tea-like consistency if you like of yellow ochre and just getting it in nice and quickly. Again, feel free to use any colours you like for this one. Here again, some watery cadmium orange. A slightly thicker consistency here of the purple, meaning slightly less water than paint. And I've also picked up a little bit of red, I think, on my brush, but that's fine. Just let those colours mix and blend on the paper, and from a relatively small palette of 5 or 6 colours, you just get millions. Just a little tilt here of my board to let the paint run down, just to see what happens. Just splatting in here and having a bit of fun, and again really not trying to paint anything in particular, just letting the paint do its thing and not being afraid of using lots of water. So these could be some pine trees in the distance, so I'm just using the end of my brush again and pulling out some details. I hadn't really planned to do some trees, but sometimes you just got to let things evolve, see where the painting takes you. Horizontal splats straight into the wet here, just to add a bit of texture. And tapping in a few clean water blobs just to get some forced back runs and uneven drying time. There we go, let it dry and look at those lovely textures and different effects that you get just by letting the paint work for you. Now it could be a landscape with trees if you use your imagination. Softening the glue again on the masking tape with a hairdryer. And slowly peeling off. Oh, I do quite like that effect at the edge there where the paint's crept under the masking tape. All intentional, of course. Well, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did, and you'll give them a go. Remember, these are purely exercises, just demonstrations, just ways of you to getting used to using the paint in lots of different situations. And if you end up with something which could look like a landscape, then that's great, but don't feel pressure to paint a landscape. And just a short announcement, there won't be a tutorial next week because by the time this is going out, we'll be down in Devon at one of our painting retreats. Unless you're watching this in the future and I'll be already at home. Anyway, you know what I mean. But as always, please don't forget to like, subscribe if you haven't already. It is free. Leave a comment. I do read every single one. Can't always reply to them all. And of course, I look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks' time for another Watercolour Wednesday. Take care now, everyone. Bye for now.